The human experience, with our flaws, our passions, our triggers, our inspirations, and our imprints. If we could see behind everyone's story, then perhaps what we would have is deep compassion. In this podcast, I get the chance to explore these stories from some truly fascinating people in some honest and heartwarming conversations. And best of all, I get to share these discussions with you. I'm Lael Stone, and this is Humans Being.
So today, my solo episode, I wanted to explore a concept or a question that people often ask me, which is, what is doing the work? And it's something I think that is spoken about a lot these days. We need to do the work, but what is doing the work? I mean, a lot of people are going, does that just mean going to therapy, or what actually is it? And so today, what I wanted to do is I wanted to break it down a little bit about what I feel is doing the work, or what the invitation is when we get to a point in our life where we start to question who we are, where we've come from, and perhaps we start to lean into the things that don't work for us anymore. Perhaps we start to not want to, behave in certain ways or be around certain people when we're invited to kind of lean into who you actually really, really are. I mean, the whole idea of this podcast of humans being is really about understanding the human within all of us. So let's have a chat about what is doing the work. Now, before we even get there, I want to start with, I guess, what most of us have been imprinted with, or what our culture models to us. So in all the hundreds or thousands of people that I've spoken to over these years, particularly when I ask them about their childhood or what their imprints were around emotional awareness, emotional intelligence, most people will say to me they grew up in homes or environments where when they got angry, when they got upset, when they felt scared, when they made a mistake, that they either got shut down, they got shamed, perhaps they got ignored, maybe they were made fun of. And by and large, I think for the majority of people, that emotions, feelings, and leaning into what was there for us was not necessarily encouraged. And again, as we look at history, we look through time, it's understandable. Our parents, our grandparents, our great grandparents, they didn't necessarily have the space to lean into their feelings or to look at what the impact of that is on relationships or their own children. A lot of the time, they were just trying to put food on the table. They were trying to survive. They were just trying to create some safety in their households. So I think this generation of people, we are at a time and a place where we have the resources, we have the insights, we have the support, we have the research to lean into who we are as humans, but also what emotional intelligence is and the importance of what that is for our next generations to come. So I think the first thing is just to start with that most of us, we're not modeled healthy ways to deal with our feelings. So my first inquiry for you is to kind of lean into a little bit about thinking around when you were a child and you got angry, you got upset, maybe you made a mistake. How did the adults in your life respond to you? Did you, get shamed? Did you get sent to your room? Did you get smacked? Did you get ignored? Did you get made fun of? Or did they sit down and say, hey, what are we learning from this? Or what is here for you? Or what feelings are arising within you? I mean, if we just pause for a minute and think about what was modeled to me, now that often becomes our blueprint or our imprint for how we deal with feelings, how we deal with tricky situations. I mean, this is not uncommon. If you grew up in a family where someone got mad at someone else, they just started yelling at each other and everybody just kind of yelled to try and prove their point. And what often happens is yelling becomes the default when things are not okay. So you see that as normal, and then perhaps you grow up and you get into a relationship, and then, when your partner doesn't do something you like or something goes on, you just start yelling, and, we're just repeating the pattern because to you, perhaps yelling is a form of love and it shows that you actually care. Or the opposite of that is perhaps you grew up in a family where something went wrong and nobody just spoke about it. We just kind of buried it under the carpet. We pretended it wasn't happening. We didn't speak about the things that felt unspeakable. And, that was maybe the model of the imprint. And so you grow up and you go into life and you get into relationships. And again, when something goes wrong or something doesn't feel good, we just kind of turn the other way or we shut it down. I mean, they are probably the two most common scenarios for a lot of people. We move into anger and attack to defend ourselves, or we just shut down and repress and pretend it doesn't exist. So there is a kind of healthy middle ground here, which is about our invitation to feel what is present for us, to have those tricky conversations, to lean into to have conversations around boundaries or hurt or pain, or even just ask for what we need. Could you cuddle me? Could you hold me while I cry? Or even just, I am so mad and angry. I need a healthy way to get this out. Can you be present with me? I mean, these are things and concepts that feel very, very foreign for people because we have all often grown up in a time where that was not acknowledged or it wasn't held as something that was a positive thing. So here we are at this point in time where we are beginning to realize that perhaps we need to do some healing work, that perhaps, the stories and imprints that we carry, maybe don't serve us. And particularly we see this for parents when their children come along and they respond in certain ways that push our buttons and we get all fired up and we end up yelling and that doesn't feel good. And that's where most of the time people come to find me is because they're like, I don't like the way I'm parenting, or the other thing is they're just often saying, my child just won't listen to me, or how do I deal with all this stuff? And it's often an invitation to lean in and do the work and see where our triggers are or see what is bubbling within us. So what I have found over the years is that we all have the opportunity to do the work and to lean in. But most of us don't wake up in the morning and go, gee, today's a great day to deal with my childhood trauma. Or, I might look at all those repressed feelings that I have sitting there. Like, we don't do that, right? And there's a good reason we don't do that because it feels uncomfortable and nobody really wants to lean into it. I mean, we're all often looking just for comfort, or we're looking for stability, or we're looking for safety. And that makes sense because that is part of being human, which is I want to stay comfortable. I want to feel good in my world. And we should. But we also have to explore the dark as much as we explore the light. And for me, I think we often meet a crossroad at some point in our journey where the invitation is to do the actual work. And that will often turn up with some form of catalyst. So I love, and I talk about this in my book, in Your Story, about we often will come to doing the work because we have some form of crisis. So often what happens is we have, and in my book I talk about this, and I got this really learning from my mum's work out in the world. We have this tribal way of being. She calls it a tribal way of being, which is really about when we belong to the kind of masses in the way that we all think, which is often where we think that success is, earning lots of money, getting good grades, looking a certain way, achieving success. For a long time, our measure of success has been all the external things that exist out there. And our belief system is if I have all those things, then I will be enough, right? So that's the narrative that we've been sold for a really, really long time. But that is starting to change because I think we're beginning to realize that success isn't so much about the external things that we have. It's actually often about the relationships that we have. It's about a calm nervous system. It's about living in alignment with our values, our purpose, all that kind of stuff. I think we're beginning to see that is what feels good. But we have, I think, this unconscious way of thinking a lot of the time, which is where we get caught up in the masses and these belief systems that who we are is really all about what everybody else thinks of us and all the boxes that we can tick around what success should look like. So the majority of the world kind of sits in that camp. And when we're sitting in that place, often what we do is we blame others a lot. We make it other people's faults. We often say that things are not fair. We often can be very judgmental of other people. We sit in a place where we like to gossip about others, and all of us, I think, have been at that place at some point in our lives, right? We can live in that place there. But then sometimes something happens. Some form of crisis often happens, and it can be referred to as a dark night of the soul event. And that can look like all of a sudden we get fired from our job, or perhaps we get sick and we're realizing that the way we live our life doesn't serve us, or perhaps someone we love dearly dies, or perhaps we have a child. I mean, that can be just a massive game changer in your life. That can be a bit of a dark night of the soul where we actually have to start really thinking and contemplating about who we actually are. Most of the time, at some point in our lives, we will have some kind of shakeup. And what we do with that shake-up is very, very important, because when we are often traversing that dark night of the soul experience, what happens is it starts to feel wobbly underneath us. The foundations that we stand on that make us think, I'm safe, I'm okay, sometimes start to begin to feel a little bit rocky. So we start to actually ask those deeper questions. Who am I? Who do I want to be? How does it feel when I'm hanging out with certain people? It doesn't necessarily feel good striving for all this approval from people out there anymore. We start to actually question, or maybe look, where did I come from? Do some of those things serve me? Maybe some don't. We start to actually really lean into, who am I as a human? And often when we're in this kind of second level of consciousness, or this second place of being, it can feel really, really lonely, because it's usually at this time where we begin to question a lot of who we are and what we're doing this lifetime. And sometimes what we do is we try and bring other people into that story. We start having these conversations about, who am I and where do I want to be? I mean, maybe this is the time when we're in this space where we start seeking out help. Perhaps we go to therapy, or maybe we look for other ways to meet our needs. We might join a yoga class, we might do breath work, we might start meditating. There's a deep desire to lean more into the essence of who we are. We start to look inside. And yet often what happens when we start to do this, we sometimes want to share it with the people we love. But if we have a whole group of people who are still sitting in this kind of more unconscious way of being, sometimes what happens is they start to judge or criticize what we're doing. They're like, why are you thinking like that? And why are you hanging out with those people? Or they start to really kind of touch on, why are you changing? And the reason why they often do that is because it often mirrors back to them that perhaps they're not shifting or looking within, or doing that work. And often what we do is we like people to stay the same as what they've always been, because then we know what we're going to get. And so when you are often making this shift, these changes, when you are starting to look deeper within, sometimes that family of origin or the people we've known for a long time go, what are you doing? And they kind of pull us back into that way of being. And because we have such a fundamental need to belong, we go back there. And then maybe we hang out with everybody, but we get into gossiping, or we get into comparing, or we get into judging, and we go, it doesn't feel good. And we're like, that doesn't feel like me anymore. And then we step back into this other way of being and the deeper contemplations. And here's the reality of it. We can often swing between both these places quite often. You can be sitting in this space where you feel like you are getting more connected to yourself, where you are really starting to take care of who you are are starting to put boundaries in place, you are starting to perhaps think there's something bigger than me. And then we go and hang out with our family, and straight away we're back in that space again. And then we're like, it doesn't feel good. And here's the thing about it, is we don't judge anybody who's sitting over here. They're just doing what they need to do. I mean, we're all doing the best job we know how. But this kind of dark night of the soul and this journey into the deeper contemplation is such an individual journey. And I find that a lot of people that come to my courses or my mentorships, they're sitting in that place because they're looking for some insight or some guidance into who they are. They are wanting to ask those deeper questions. They are wanting to lean into, who am I and who do I want to be in the world? So we sit in this place and it can feel pretty lonely, because usually it's just you and it's you doing the inner work. And this is often where we start to explore concepts like the inner child. It's perhaps where we start to do reparenting work. It's perhaps where we own our behaviour in different places. It is definitely a space where we start to have better boundaries. We have greater self-care. And it is a place where I think we start to lean into having compassion for ourselves and hopefully compassion for others. And then as we do this beautiful integration work and we start to heal parts of our story, parts of our past, we then can make the step into a more conscious way of being, into a whole other way of living, which in my book I refer to it as a symbolic way of being, which is where we start to live our life from the essence of who we are. And usually when we are in this space, we are able to stand in a place of non-judgment. It's usually where we are following our passion and our purpose. It's usually where we don't have to apologize or justify why we do what we do. It's usually where we prioritize joy and play and connection. It's where we speak our truth, but not yelling it. We speak it from a place of grounded, anchored embodiment. It's where we're often able to be present with others. It's where we, perhaps if you're a parent from a way of, consciousness or awareness. It's where we get to stand in a place where we feel deeply aligned with who we are. And like many other things, we can stand in that place and then something can throw us out again and we can, get triggered back into being in another way. And then we go, no, I don't want to feel like that. And then we come back here again. And it's a dance. And I think we often learn how to dance in those different places. But as we begin to live a more symbolic life, or we begin to live a life where we are more in alignment with who we are, what happens is it's easier to see and catch it when we step out of balance. It's easier to observe when we get triggered. It's easier to understand, the things that activate us, and we don't judge it, and we don't hang around there much. We're curious. We're able to work through it, and then come back to living from a place of deep authenticity, or living from a place of awareness and consciousness. Now, this may sound like a kind of foreign concept or just something that feels wild, but I have found over many, many years of working with humans and myself swinging between those three columns regularly, that I think our deep desire when we want something more is to live from that place of consciousness, is to live from a place of alignment with who we are. Yet it can feel very tricky to get there. And there's often a path we need to take in order to live that. And the path often that we need to explore is the path of doing that inner healing work, doing the work. And what doing the work often is about going back and allowing ourselves to feel what we often couldn't feel at a time when we had hurts, when we had traumas, when we had wounds. Because again, I invite you to think about when we were growing up, when we were little. If we grew up in an environment where it wasn't okay to cry, wasn't okay to get angry, wasn't okay to be upset, when those things happened to us, when we had those ruptures, when there was a fight with our siblings, when our parents yelled at us, when we were locked outside for doing something wrong or whatever it was, in those moments, what we would have needed is we would have needed to cry. We would have needed an adult to tune into us and say, hey, you okay? I'm here. What's going on for you? Let it out. But most of the time, we were left alone with our feelings. Or most of the time, we learn, in order to survive here, I need to repress this. I need to push it down. I need to be good in order to survive. Yet those feelings still exist within us. And those feelings can become imprints and patterns and beliefs and stories that sit within. And then as an adult, when we find ourselves in similar situations, perhaps when someone's making fun of us, perhaps when we're having to do something we feel out of our comfort zone, perhaps those parts of us that are like, I'm not very smart or I'm incompetent, start to raise their head. Or perhaps when we are with a whole group of friends and we say something and people laugh, but all of a sudden we have this story that reminds us, don't be too loud, don't be too big, don't be the center of attention. All of a sudden those pieces, those wounds, those stories get activated and boom, we're right back in that place. And so when we talk about doing the work, what we're talking about is stepping back into those wounds and places and spaces and holding them tenderly and perhaps giving them what they needed at the time that they never got. Now, there's many ways that we can do this. We can do this by writing and journaling. We can do this by a memory or a story popping up, perhaps when we were 6 and we got yelled at for breaking something and it wasn't our fault. Yet we carried this shame and we created a story at that moment that said, I have to be perfect all the time or else I'm going to get yelled at. And so what we can do is we can go back to that little 6-year-old and we can offer them the love and the compassion and the understanding that perhaps they didn't get. And you can do this by getting a pen and paper and writing on one side of the paper how that little 6-year-old in you felt. I felt scared. It wasn't my fault. I made a mistake. I didn't mean to do it. I don't like it when you yell at me. I was just trying to do the best I could, or whatever sits there for you. And then what we can do is we can then offer that younger part of us the love, the comfort, the acknowledgement that it didn't get. From the adult in us, we can say to the little child, I know you didn't do it on purpose. Perhaps we say things like, I love you just the way you are. It's okay to make a mistake. Perhaps we say things like, I'm sorry you were scared and left alone with your feelings. I'm here with you now. It's those words of comfort and love and support that we all deeply crave and need that we often didn't get, that causes the pain and the hurt. It allows things to stay stuck in our system, and then they pop up in little places in our life when that same energy or that same essence is there. All of a sudden it pops up and boom, we're right back in that 6-year-old self. So we can do it through journaling, through that beautiful inner dialogue stuff. We can take it to a therapist and help get them to hold the space for us to work through it. We can talk about it with a listening partner, with a friend. Sometimes what we need to do is we just need to move our bodies and acknowledge it. We can do modalities like internal family systems work. We can look at systemic programming and family systemic constellation work to help us. There are so many different therapies out there that are amazing. I am often all about find the thing that resonates for you. But the key thing that often is across all of those things when it comes to doing the work is being brave enough and courageous enough to lean into the places that feel uncomfortable. We are all so good at turning away from stuff that feels hard. And why wouldn't we be? Because if we were taught as young children that it's not safe to feel, well, then the protective parts of us go, okay, I'll just turn over here, or pretend it doesn't exist, or pretend it hasn't happened. It makes sense. We can't judge ourselves for it. We are just all doing the best job we know how. I say this over and over again. We are all coming from protection, which means we are all trying to keep ourselves safe. And sometimes keeping ourselves safe means ignoring it, turning away, pretending it's not happening. Yet, if you want to live a more conscious life, if you want to not carry these patterns and stories onto your children, then the invitation is to be courageous, to lean into those tricky places. However, we have to be ready. We have to go slowly. We have to tread gently. This is not about ripping up something and going, here we go, let's deal with all the trauma. That's not a way to do it. It's so vital that we go at a pace that feels okay for you. And this is why getting extra support, therapy, it's having somebody in your corner who you can talk to is so vital and important. Because for some people, we need to go really slowly. We need to go really, really gently. But just being willing or knowing that there is a place to start is a really good thing. And so how can we start? Well, we can do things like journaling. We can do a lot of reflective practices. We can get curious about the things that keep turning up in our lives. Or what we can do is we can just start to watch and observe where we get triggered in the day-to-day actions of being a human. Do we get really fired up and angry when we're driving in the car? Do we get really annoyed when our child says something to us and we feel it's disrespectful? Do we lose it when a colleague, makes fun of us at work, even though they're kind of joking? Where are the places and the activations in you where you start to feel triggered, where you start to lose your center, where that narrative starts to come in around, I'm not good enough, this isn't okay, whatever it sounds like for you? Because it's those moments where we want to pause, take a step back, take a really deep breath, and just ask, what's going on for me right now? What am I feeling? Am I feeling angry? Am I feeling frustrated? Am I feeling guilty? Am I feeling shame? Am I feeling scared? Am I feeling worried? Am I feeling anxious? Like, what's here for me right now? And when we can be with what is with us right now, when we can lean into that, then we can take another step and go, okay, I have that feeling there. It's not wrong. It's just there. And then you might want to ask yourself another question. What does this remind me of? Do I know this feeling from somewhere? Is this a similar feeling to what I have with my sister? Is this the feeling I had when my dad would get angry when I was younger? Is this the feeling I had when I was at high school and I didn't think that I was smart enough? Like, let's see if we can find a thread of where this feeling comes from. And sometimes you can't, and it's okay if you can't. Many people say they don't remember their childhoods, and that's not unusual, and that is okay if you don't. It's not right, it's not wrong. We just stay with what is the feeling that is present in my body. But as we're with that feeling, as we take a deep breath, or as we take a step back, hopefully we can begin to see what the activations are. Now, sometimes the activations are all about boundaries. Sometimes we get annoyed, we get angry, we get fired up because someone's crossing our boundary or someone's not treating us okay. And that's a good reason to get fired up. It's a good reason to get angry. It is okay to have those big reactions when someone is crossing the line. And that's not a bad reason to get activated and go, hey, that is not okay. You cannot cross my boundary, or that is not all right in the world, and I'm going to take a stand for what's going on. There are good reasons why we feel fired up. And the first thing we really want to go to is there something here around a boundary that's being crossed, or is there perhaps a need that is not being met for me? Now, I see this in parenting all the time, particularly when we have parents that aren't taking care of themselves. Perhaps their self-care isn't there, or perhaps, they just need a break and they get angry at their kids or they yell at their partner. And really the activation of that anger and that trigger is all around a need that hasn't been met. And so when we take a break, when we get some support, when we have a cry, when we have a cuddle, we go for a walk on our own, it helps us to reset and we come back to our center. So sometimes these activations are beautiful little invitations to be what needs to shift in my world practically right now. It's always the first place to start. Do I need to say no to someone? Do I need to set a boundary? Do I need to step away from a toxic person in my world? Or do I need to make some shifts to actually get my needs met? That's where we start. But if it's not those things and it's something a bit deeper, then it may be inviting you to feel into, is this a story from my past that's being activated? Is there a part of me that knows this feeling well? Is there something that's asking to be healed deeper within? And when we do that healing, when we recognize it, when we love on that inner child, when we get the support we need, then the activation lessens. The same thing may happen, but we don't feel so triggered. It may happen again, and this time perhaps we're able to speak our truth in a way we weren't before. Or perhaps we are able to observe it with curiosity instead of reactivity. This is all parts of doing the work, so that hopefully we get to move through life. And it's not like when we do this, we're never going to have conflict. And it's not like when we do this, we're never not going to be uncomfortable. Because as humans, we go like this, right? But what we get better at is being comfortable in the uncomfortable. What we get better at is being able to catch it when something activates us or triggers us. We're able to go, isn't that interesting? I'm having a reaction. What is that about for me? We get better at leaning in instead of always leaning out. And here's the beauty of doing the work. It allows you to become more authentically you. I often say it allows you to come home to yourself, which is that the truth of who you are. Because the reality is most of us, we don't actually walk through the world being who we really are because we've had to put on this identity. We've had to learn to be a certain way to survive. And again, that is very clever of us all because we're all coming from protection. We're all trying to stay safe in our world and what we deem as, being okay and not. But then I think as we move into adulthood, we have this beautiful opportunity to lean into what would my best life look like? How do I be the most authentic version of me? And in order to do that, we often need to understand who we are, look at our past, see the parts that make us up, so we can do that beautiful work We can heal those places that need to be healed. We can be okay with being vulnerable. We can take these steps forward so we get to live our best life. And I know personally, but from many, many people I've worked with, no one ever regrets doing the work. No one ever regrets healing those things because it doesn't feel good carrying around a big backpack full of trauma. It doesn't feel good carrying around a backpack full of imprints that don't serve us. The beautiful thing about being human is that we all have the opportunity to heal, to repair, to forgive, to be kind. It's there, but sometimes things just get in the way. So my invitation to you as you listen to this is to not feel burdened that there's a whole lot of work to do. And it's not to sit there and think, oh God, this is a giant mess. It's just to take one day at a time, to get curious. What feels good for me? What is my yes? What is my no? Where could I lean into something that maybe feel uncomfortable but is an invitation for me to do some work? Perhaps if you're a parent, how could I show up being the best parent that I can be? How do I lean into those triggers, those activations, and heal that stuff so my kids don't have to carry it? All of this takes courage. And I invite you to lean into that courage. I invite you to lean into the support in whatever way it can show up in your world. Because the more that we do this, the more courage you show, the more willingness you have to do this beautiful work, I promise you, the happier you will be. The more aware you will be, the more compassionate you will be. And that's what our beautiful world needs right now. We need more compassionate, aware humans. So this is my invitation to you. Be brave. Be courageous. Lean in. Thanks for listening. Let me know how this lands for you. Remember that we're all humans doing the best job we know how.
Thanks for sharing this time with me. You can find my book, Own Your Story, at bookshops or listen to the audiobook on Audible. I even read it myself. You can stay connected with Humans Being on Instagram, Facebook, or YouTube. We love to hear from you, so please leave a comment, question, or contemplation. And visit my website, laelstone.com.au, where you'll find heaps of great resources and courses for you to explore. This podcast is produced by Nigel Carboon, recorded by the crew at We Make Online Videos, and our original music is created by Josh Reed. Humans Being is produced on the lands of the Bunurong and Wadawurrung people. We pay respect to their unique and diverse cultures and to elders past, present, and future. Until next time, stay connected and don't forget to be human.